Thanks so much for that dynamic intro, InstaRob. Start by unboxing the legs that I got from Osborne Wood Products. Then we set up the table saw to start ripping and cleaning up these rough sawn boards. I use Magport fittings there with my hoses, and everything is mobile so that I can move it around the shop very easily because I do such big projects. Now we use the saw stop here and we rip through the boards first. You'll notice some of them are also cross-cut at the beginning. I do that just to make it easier to handle in the environment that I work in. You know, because this is a big table. This is a 10-foot table. I had to angle my saw stop in my studio here to make sure these boards can get ripped at their full length. And with this beautiful saw, I'm able to actually get a nice clean glue up. I start by numbering the boards, then I put a line on the top just to indicate where I'm going to put the loose tenons with the Festool domino. Then I go through and I use the loose tenon setting here. This allows it to be so much easier when I actually go to assemble it. I do that for the top panel. I do that for the leaf extensions that are a nice surprise on this big, beautiful table. Here we go, wiping the glue. We're going to put those tenons in. I use this mallet to get them in nice and snug. The loose tenon setting actually makes this significantly easier to do and to handle. Now we're working on the tabletop here, which is just plain huge. You're going to see how many loose tenons I put in this table, dominoes, how many clamps I put on top of the table. This took the whole rack, the whole clamp rack, in order to get it done. Then we start sanding it. Now I didn't add a lot of videos of sanding on this table because, well, it took forever, a couple of hours, probably like 5 or 6 different hours, just for the panels to make sure that they are perfectly smooth and perfectly fine. There's me getting down low, making sure it's nice and beautiful. Now here I am cutting slots in the aprons for the extension rails. That'll be a nice surprise in the bottom of this table. This one has 2 18-inch extensions on the ends. Now I pick 18 inches because that allows folks to put one more place setting on either side of the table, but it gives it the stability that it needs because these rails that I make are made out of wood, and so they flex and they move. And you'll notice too that I ended up using walnut for the wood for the rail extensions, not because I wanted to spend more money on the wood for that portion of the table, but simply because that is what I had in stock on hand ready to go for it. So I just grabbed it and put it on there. It's a nice little treat when you open up the table. Then we go and we measure for the aprons, cutting the aprons to length on the Festool K-Pack. Here we go, using a Forstner bit to cut some slots for the figure 8 tabletop fasteners that I use. These things are amazing, super easy to install, allows for wood movement in the table. Now at this point in the table, before I actually set the legs, I put those on so I can get the apron attached nice and snugly, and then I make adjustments on it accordingly as needed. But here I am putting in a 45-degree angle on the legs. This is where I'm going to put the hanger bolts for the legs, as those are the bolts that come out of the legs into the table frame so that it can attach and secure nice and firmly. And this is one of those parts of the table build that when I was first figuring out tables, I was a little confused as to what the purpose was, how to get it to work. But now that I've made a ton of tables, what ends up happening is these 2 aprons on the side actually help hold those legs perfectly straight at 90 degrees, straight up and down. And that 45-degree angle there allows the legs to attach. When those legs get attached onto those hanger bolts that I put onto the legs, the leg secures to the apron and gets a nice, clean 90-degree angle going straight to the ground. Here we go for the rails and the residual hardware for the extension system. These hold the rails nice and flat and flush as they slide in and out from underneath the table. Putting some holes through the rails for the attachment system that I use, and how I get these to attach to the bottom of the table is to attach these rails. I use these T-bolts that I put on the underside of the table, even though this is an extremely nerve-wracking part because, first I got to use a bigger Forstner bit to countersink these T-bolts, then I got to use the 1/2-inch Forstner bit and to leave for space for the bolts that hold the rails on in the bottom of the table, and it ends up giving me like 1/4 of an inch between where that hole is in the top of the table. Here's the T-bolts. These are absolutely fantastic. They've got screws that I can thread in there to make them extremely stable and strong. Pretty much no matter what size you end up being, you can get up at the end of the table, put a bit of pressure on it, and move it. This is me getting the hardware set up, actually the fasteners for the extension rails. Those are called hex knobs. And I am water popping the table, then I'm applying some Rubio monocoat here. This color is Oyster. Now it looks really, really gray when you apply it, but once you wipe it off, it gets a nice, real rustic, old world look to the white oak, and it's just absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. Really elevates the grain of the wood. And when they say Rubio monocoat, they really mean one coat here. I put it on and I use a squeegee to scrape it back and forth, back and forth. I always start going with the grain of the wood, and then I go against the grain of the wood and back a 3rd time with the grain of the wood as I apply it. I wipe it off and then I buff it by hand. Not just buff it, but get all the material off so it doesn't get tacky. Take the rags, put them, store them safely in the fireproof container. Now here we have our 2nd round of special treats on the bottom of this table. The 2nd round, we're using the Shaper Origin to cut a nice sweet phrase on the bottom of the table, which is a surprise for my customer's wife. Such a surprise that they had friends over the other day. They reached under the table, felt the phrase that's on the bottom, and nobody knew what it was except for the husband. All of the friends and folks and the wife got on the ground to look at what it says. It says, "Life moves pretty fast. If you don't sit down and eat together, you could miss it." What a sweet phrase. And I am assembling the table here one last time to get it ready for the beautiful pictures. Using those hanger bolts, putting in those rail extensions, even putting in the extensions on the end, that other surprise. So cool. Now these thumb screws make it super easy. Just take it in and out for any normal folks. And you just kind of line them up, tighten them up, nice and stable, and those rails run the length of the table on the underside to give a ton of extra support for whoever is sitting at the end of the table. Now let me show you how we take these extensions off as well. One hand operation for those rails, super smooth and easy to use. Here we are, the final pictures, table in its singular position without the extensions. We've got the rails, we've got the extensions installed, and we are ending with customer photos as well. If you liked this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and enable the notifications.